This podcast is sponsored by A. Miller George Funeral Home, where each life is celebrated, and their sister company, Cremation London and Middlesex, both family-owned and operated. By Hyde Park Care Pharmacy. Experience the difference an independent pharmacy can make for you and your loved ones. Hyde Park Care Pharmacy offers personalized care, short wait time, very competitive pricing, easy transfer of your prescription, and much more. And by Molly Maid. During these times of COVID-19, it has never been more important to keep your family safe. With the Healthy Home Cleaning System, Molly Maid London is here to help. Make your home a healthy haven. Call Molly Maid London today. The Vicars Crossing is excited to welcome Susie and Tony Troxler. Tony and Susie met in Greensboro, North Carolina, and married in March 2008. They'd planned to start a family a few years into their marriage, but it never happened. A few years turned into more than a decade and still no child. Believing in the faithfulness of God, they both continued to hold on to the promise that they would one day have a family. And on September 29th, 2021, at the ages of 61 and 50, the couple gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, Lily.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever and wherever you may be. Welcome to another edition of the Vicars Crossing podcast. The Vicars Crossing is a virtual space where faith intersects with the public square. My name is Rob Henderson, and I serve as the priest at Holy Trinity St. Stephen's Anglican Church in London, Ontario.
Hello, everybody. My name is Kevin George. I am a priest at St. Aidan's Anglican Church and a friend of Rob. Great guy.
My name is Ian. I am a producer, content creator, and the person sending this podcast out into your ears and eyes. I hope you're doing okay out there.
Right. We are the Vicars Crossing with you today, and we are celebrating our 6th season on the Vicars Crossing, and we are now up to our 13th episode of season 6. And today we are very excited to welcome two wonderful guests. We'll be talking to Susie and Tony Troxler. Susie and Tony met in Greensboro, North Carolina. They were married in March of 2008, and they planned to start a family a few years into their marriage, but it never happened for them. And a few years turned into more than a decade and still no child. But believing in their faithfulness of God, they both continued to hold on to the promise that they would one day have a family. And on September 29th, 2021, at the ages of 61 and 50, the couple gave birth to a beautiful girl named Lily.
Lily, that's incredible.
So it's a wonderful story, and we're going to talk to the Troxlers about that today on the Vicars Crossing.
I just say before I do the land acknowledgement that I also am 50, and she's 51 now, I think, and I'm 51. I think if my first child came along now, there will be some problems. Because I'm not sure I can handle it. But anyway.
Oh, you'd be okay.
Yeah, okay,
you'd be in good stead. You really would.
Well, we'll see. Anyway.
Because at 50, you got it all figured out, right?
Oh, is that right? Okay.
All you can do is pass down wisdom.
Well, my thought is that at 25, you just don't care. You're not old enough to know the difference. So you can take on the world, right? But at 50, I know so much. It's like, well, please, no children, none. So I applaud them. They're incredible people. And I had a grand chat with her in preparation for this. I really look forward to talking to her and Tony today. In the meantime, we want to acknowledge that the lands upon which the Vicars Crossing record this podcast are the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenape, and Attawandaron peoples, lands that are connected with the London Township and Sombra Treaties of 1796 and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum. These lands continue to be home to diverse Indigenous peoples with whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of this land and vital contributors to our society, and people with whom we wish to walk the path towards reconciliation, hope, and a new future together.
I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors on the Vicars Crossing podcast, without whom none of this would be happening. We want to say hello and thank you to A. Miller George Funeral Home, where each life is celebrated, and their sister company, Cremation London, Middlesex, both family owned and operated. And again, our thanks to Dave Mullen and his staff for their wonderful support.
And of course, we want to offer our thanks to Hyde Park Care Pharmacy. Hyde Park Care Pharmacy, locally owned, locally operated, locally loved. Get on over there and see Carol Bassetta. Move your prescriptions from the big box. You won't be disappointed.
And last, but certainly not least, we want to say a huge thank you to Molly Maid. Make your home a healthy haven. Call Molly Maid London. When? Today. Call them today.
Call them today.
And Trisha Lister is the human being over there who hooked us up with that. So thank you to them over there.
That's awesome.
Hey, and when you call Molly Maid, make sure you tell them you heard it on the Vicars Crossing.
That's right. Please do. Yeah.
Do that. All right, guys. We are going to be having our guests come here in a minute, but before we welcome them, we want to look ahead a little bit. And Kevin, it's time for us to play our little game that we like to call "Who in the World Did You Book This Week?"
Well, am I ever glad you asked, Rob? Drum roll, please. Well, this week, we're glad to say that we have booked acclaimed religion scholar Timothy Beale to talk about his forthcoming book, When Time is Short, Finding Our Way in the Anthropocene. Comes out on May 31st. We're going to see him in June. It's a meditation for what may be a finite human future. When time is short, ask how we got here to help us imagine a different relationship with the natural world. So big questions about climate change, big questions about how we can interact with creation in ways that are more responsible as people of faith.
Perfect. Well, look forward to that coming up on the Vicars Crossing. Coming up today, Susie and Tony, and they're in our waiting room. So we're going to invite them in and get our chat underway.
Amen. I bet you they got Lily with them too. Let's see.
And Susie and Tony are here. The Vicars Crossing podcast. We welcome you. How are you guys today?
Thank you. We're doing great. Thank you.
Now is Lily hiding around somewhere?
She's on her daddy's lap.
Oh, there we go. And there's Lily.
Say hi.
Hello, Lily.
That's right. Lily, congratulations. You are now officially the youngest person to ever be on the Vicars Crossing podcast.
Absolutely.
So that's awesome.
I think we need to get Vicars. I think we need to get a Vicars Crossing bib or something for
There you go. There you go.
Get some new swag.
Yeah.
So, well, guys, we're so happy you're here today and so happy that you can share your story with us. Just for our listeners' sake, though, to kind of place where you're at. You're in North Carolina, right?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
High Point, North Carolina.
High Point, North Carolina. All right.
Yes.
All right. Very good. Well, we're glad you're with us today, and lots to talk about. You've been on a wonderful journey over the last little while, and by God's grace, we have lots to talk about today in the gift of Lily. So we're going to do that. So maybe I'll ask Kevin to kind of get us underway.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yours is an incredible story. I remember when I saw you on the news last year, I was like, holy crapola. Like, this is a 61-year-old man and a 50-year-old woman are having babies. Now, part of the reason is I'm your age, Susie. And my wife and I, we've been married 26 years now, and we don't have kids. And it wasn't because we didn't plan to, or we did plan to, it just never happened. You know, and so when I saw that, I was like, okay, Catherine Ann cannot see this story. I can't let my wife see
never
it.
too late. Never too late.
No, she's not allowed to watch this episode, Susie. I have a lifestyle to which I become accustomed.
You like sleeping. Sleeping is a wonderful thing.
I love sleep. Call me mean, but I love my sleep. Listen, tell us about, to get started, because there's a lot to unpack here, but we want to do this in some sort of chronology. So tell us about your time together as a couple. I mean, you guys, you started this journey to parenthood a few years back when you married, not so long ago. And I know the other thing is, you told me in our previous conversation that somewhere at some point on that journey, God made you a promise that you were going to have a little girl. So tell us about how you two met and that journey a little bit up to that place in the story.
Okay. All right. You want me to do it, or you want to go? All right. He knows I'm the talker, so there we go. Well, we met in 2007.
Yes.
And we were friends for a little bit, collaborated on some stuff. And then we actually married on March 1st of 2008.
Okay.
And at first, we were firm believers in enjoy your time as a couple before you start a family. So we were the first 2 years, we were just being a couple, doing things.
Grooving, everything.
Doing all the stuff that, couples do.
Yeah.
And then a couple of years in, we were like, okay, now we're ready to go ahead and start a family. So we just proceeded with that journey. And it just never happened. We just assumed it would.
Yeah.
And, I tell people, I don't want to say we forgot about it, but, we were about the business of just still doing what we did the first 2 years, which is going places, doing things. And then we looked up and it was 9
And you knew how it worked. Just to interrupt you, you knew how it worked, right? You knew how big.
Absolutely.
So you know how to make
work
babies.
in motion 2 years in, and nothing. That's nothing.
So you were doing all the right things that you're supposed to do to make a baby. Okay.
All the right things to make a baby, and nothing was happening. And like I said, we weren't stressed about it. We just figured, God would bless us with that bundle of joy when the time came. And then 9 years went by, 10 years went by, 11 years went by, and we're like, okay, something weird is going on. So around that time, this would have been, oh my goodness, this would have been late 2018. Okay. Tony got a new job with the hospital. Yeah. And so I'm like, okay, good. New insurance. Woohoo. Yeah. We're going to go.
So it's something we don't know about in Canada. Yeah. So you got to have insurance, right, to make this happen.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to go. I'm going to make my OBGYN appointment. So I made the appointment and she did all her physical stuff. And at the end of the appointment, she says, do you have any questions, concerns, anything you want to know about? And I said, well, we're wondering why we haven't gotten pregnant, and she's like, okay, we can do something about that. And so the first thing she said was, I feel like, she said, I can bet money you have fibroids. So we're going to send you for that scan. And then I'm going to send you to the fertility doc. I'm like, okay. So we went. I ended up actually, I remember the day, January 22nd, 2019, had fibroid surgery to have the fibroids removed because that's what the IVF doctor said needed to happen to make a nice little environment for the baby. And then we went through this series of, procedures with my own eggs. Yeah. Okay. And so it was first, we're going to do it naturally. When we met with the IVF doc, he was really nice and super professional. But in essence, what he said was, the likelihood that they would get good eggs from me because of my age, because I was 49 then. He said, not real high, likelihood, not real high. So, but we could try if you want to. And we were like, yes, definitely. So after the fibroid surgery, we did, these 3, possibly 4 different types of trying different things, never got a viable embryo at any point. Mm-hmm. Wow. And so now here we are inching toward the middle of 2019 and it's nothing. So at that point, we felt like the Lord was going, okay, go ahead and do donor eggs. Now, mind you, that wasn't the plan. When God made the promise, and I went back and looked at the exact date, I was doing a quiet time, November 5th, 2016. And he interrupted the quiet time to tell me, he said, you're going to have a little girl. Now, mind you, this is 2016, so this is like after a bunch of years of marriage.
Sure.
You're going to have a baby. Baby's going to be a little girl. And he said her first name should be Lily. He said, that's what you're going to name her. I said, okie dokie, we're going to do that. So here, these years have gone by, nothing. And so now we're here at the donor egg conversation. And like I said, originally, we had not planned to do the donor egg route because, of course, at first, we were certain we were going to be that miraculous family that had a baby that the doctor said could never be naturally. But we were sure that was going to be us. That didn't happen. Then we were going to be the couple with our own eggs that was highly unlikely. And that didn't happen. Then we were the donor egg. We went the donor egg route, and God's fingerprints were all over that donor egg process, left and right. And it's funny, we see now, we didn't know at the time, but after Lily got here, that donor egg part of the story actually was the part of the story that spoke to women the most. And I never would have expected that. I would have thought the natural miracle birth would have been the story, but it was really the donor egg. It was just, people kept saying that over and over again, how much hope it gave them and how awesome it was. And I was like, okay, Lord, you wrote that in the storyline because because you knew it needed to be there.
Now, let me ask you, just to go back, because you said about the promise, like, how does that come to you? Like, can you say a word about that? Like,
that was my
absolutely.
question.
I was doing one of what I call my quiet time walk. So what I was doing on that occasion was I was just walking and talking to him. And I was not talking about children, babies, nothing. Right now, I can't even remember what we were talking about. We were talking about something. And then out of the blue, it was strange. Baby names just kept popping into my head, girl baby names. Yeah. And as sure as I'm sitting here, I just felt the presence of the Lord just say, you're going to have a baby. The baby's going to be a little girl, and you're going to name her Lily.
Wow.
And I came in from that walk, and I said, Tony, guess what? we're gonna have a baby.
Okay, because that,
Guys,
well, that was my
sitting
question.
early.
Yeah, that was my question.
And-
Susie. So you
and-
shared this with Tony, right? And
Yeah,
Yeah.
I figured he wanted to know. And of course, he did what every wise husband should do. He agreed with me, but he said he was going to pray about it.
there you go,
Which
my
is
man.
exactly what he
Yeah.
did. And it was so funny because you told me later, the Holy Spirit confirmed it with him that, yep,
Mhm.
that was what was going to happen. It really, really was. So God can speak. You want something to say about that? Hey, beautiful.
I was sitting and all of a sudden I had this dream. I was on the sofa and I had this baby in a pink onesie and I was holding up and I felt so much love for this child. I couldn't even describe it. I'm like,
Yeah.
what in the
Yeah.
world? What?
Yeah.
And when I woke up that morning, I told her about it.
Mhm.
And it just so happens a few months after her mother's friend
Mhm.
told her that she would have a little girl.
Yeah. Right,
Wow,
but she was
wow.
my longtime neighbor. She lived
Mhm.
right next to my childhood home, and she was
Yeah.
talking to my mom on the phone. My mom lived with us, and she said, "Tell Susie she's gonna have a baby. Baby's gonna be a little girl."
Okay, so
And they knew nothing about anything about our journey,
Yeah.
nothing at all. So I was like,
Amazing.
"Okay, Lord, you know how to make it known
yeah.
and confirm it in whatever way you choose to, want to." And the interesting thing, and we're like, just like any human, we had our idea about how that was going to come about.
Sure.
So we were pretty certain, we were
Yeah.
gonna be again that miracle couple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That,
Yeah.
you know,
Exactly.
We're older, but it's gonna be just like Sarah and Abraham. We're just gonna magically have an Isaac.
Yeah.
And that did not at all happen.
That did not happen.
Wow.
Not
No.
at all. And like I said, we went through that journey at first. It was not gonna be a natural thing. We were
Right.
hoping it with our eggs, and then we end up with the donor egg process.
Yeah.
But it really, really taught us to expect. That's what people say. Oh, well, what was the biggest thing that stood out? Expect the unexpected.
Yeah.
When God makes a promise, so often, just like what happened with us, he didn't tell us how. We didn't know. For all we knew, it might have been adoption.
Mhm.
Fostering to adopt. We had no idea how this baby girl was going to show up.
Mm.
So we had to roll with the journey the way he laid it out.
Yeah.
Right. So you're at that point where you say your donor eggs come into play, and spoiler alert for everyone, Susie does get pregnant.
Lily's here.
Hey.
Yeah,
There she is. She's talking.
yeah,
I'm not sure if you all can hear her, but she's talking to the phone.
there she is. There she is, darling.
Yeah, they're
Um,
talking about you, honey.
So, Susie, can you tell us about the moment when you found out that your pregnancy was viable, that this was actually for real? Do you remember that
Merciful
moment?
heavens! That actually, let me back up just a hair. When we went through the donor egg process, we got enough eggs, but we only ended up with 2 viable embryos,
Oh, okay.
and only 2. And we did an immediate embryo transfer at the time that the eggs were collected, like right when we got that embryo, what they call a fresh transfer, and no pregnancy at all happened.
Okay.
So now we're down to 1 embryo.
1 egg.
Wow.
And then so now
Enter COVID.
Exactly. We're in the beginning of January. We've wrapped up everything with the first pregnancy didn't happen. We're getting cranked up, bodies ready, appointments are ready, and they shut everything down due to COVID. So this second egg that's sitting on ice at the nice little fertility place is gonna have to wait.
No way.
So that embryo, her name now,
Little Lily.
sat on ice for almost a year.
Wow.
Really?
So,
That's
so we
amazing.
didn't come out of the, so that was the beginning of 2020, March 2020. Like, I know you're talking about me. And then at the end of January 2021, we call them up and say, so are you all back in business? We're thinking we need to move forward with the embryo transfer. And they're like, oh, absolutely, let's do it. So February 1st, 2021, can you all hear? She's just talking up so much.
No, she's beautiful.
February 1st, 2021, we did the embryo transfer. And then here she is. So we found out, they did the blood test. They do like a week later, 2 weeks later, they do the blood test and they're like, okay, then the hormones are looking great. You're officially pregnant. Wonderful. But I think for us, it really clicked in when we had the first ultrasound a few weeks in. And it was like, there she is. There she is.
Yeah.
And it was surreal. And I think, honestly, it has stayed surreal ever since.
Really?
If people ask me, how did you feel when she was born? How did you feel? I'm like, it's still so weird. You're just singing. You singing for them. You singing.
Amen. Yeah, a little amazing grace.
It's still like me as a mama. That whole idea. It's so like wow.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow.
You're beautiful.
Amazing. That's
And
amazing.
So she was born September 29th, 2021. And
Yes.
Susie, you were 50, and Tony, you were 61.
Yes.
Which is like and it's the first child for both of you. That's like so amazing. Can
Mind
you
blowing.
just it's
Yep.
incredible. Can you tell us
Yep.
about like the day she was born and then how you're feeling and like
Oh
that
my
whole process and
Oh,
all of that?
oh,
my
I'm gonna let
goodness.
Tony tell you about that
Yeah,
one.
tell us about it,
Sure.
Tony.
Yeah, Tony.
I can't tell you about his feelings because I can because he made them quite evident. But it was just like, I think for me, I was very much, hi, I
Yeah.
was very much, like I said, in that surreal place. Like
Yeah.
it was, I don't know. I don't even have words for it. I mean,
Yeah.
it still felt like a dream.
Wow.
Like it wasn't even real.
Yeah.
And some elements still do. It was, but yeah, I think surreal was the moment. People are like, oh, did you cry right then? I'm like, no, I was in this kind of weird, surreal, like, this is amazing. I can't even wrap my head around the wonder of you. Can't even wrap my head around this. This is awesome.
Now you said you were going to let Tony talk.
Oh,
Yes, I am. So I'm going to let him tell you how he felt that day. While
Yeah,
I
Tony,
take
tell us about September 29th,
Okay.
2021.
Go ahead,
Day
Pops.
of the delivery day.
Yes.
All
Yeah.
right, so we go into the hospital and they set it up pretty nice. They take her into the delivery room and they're like, okay, we'll bring you in a few minutes later. So they brought me in and I'm just sitting there and they have this, I guess, this divider.
Mhm.
So you basically can't see nothing but her head up here. So
Mhm.
I'm looking at her and she's okay. She's going through it. And she starts singing a Christian song. I'm like,
Comedy, yeah.
okay.
It just came to
And
me.
what was the song again?
What did you sing?
It was believe it or not, I was humming "The Reason Why We Sing" by Kirk Franklin.
Oh,
Really
give
old
us
song from the
give-
1990s.
give us a little bit.
Okay. Someone asked a question. Why do we sing? When we lift our hands to Jesus, what do we really mean? Someone maybe wonder. So I was humming that all through her birth.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Wow.
Continue, Tony. Sorry, I interrupted. I wanted to get a little bit of that music.
Sorry, because I was listening. And after they said, here she is. And they go and put her in the little tray. And I'm like, I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry. I'm not gonna cry. So I just started staring at her. I'm like, here's your daughter. I'm like, I'm just froze in shock. And at the same time, it was amazing. It was so amazing to see her for the very first time. I'm like, oh man. And I'm gonna tell you that moment, and I will tell anybody, faith is real, yes, but it becomes more real when you see your child born.
Right.
It really does. It's
Yeah.
like, that's the miracle. It's a miracle of life. It's a miracle, period. Because after that journey, I'm like, okay, so God, I know you're here. I know you're real. So here's the evidence.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure, Tony, that moment that you first laid eyes on Lily, that'll obviously be with you for always. And even if there comes a bad time or a bad day or whatever it is, we all have them. But man, you get that image in your mind, that'll be so powerful for you.
And I have told everybody, I just sit and sometimes I just stare at her in amazement at what God's done. I'm like,
she got you around. Did she wrap around your
she did. I said that when while she was carrying her, that I'm already wrapped around her pinky.
No doubt about it.
All right. So what do the two of you say? I mean, you're now 51. You just had a birthday. Happy birthday.
I did. Yes. Thank you. On Tuesday.
Yeah. So
She
tell
turned
people
6 months the same day.
Right. There's a little connection there, right? So every 6 months you get to celebrate, right?
Yeah. I tell people, if you're looking for him, you will find him, because they scheduled the cesarean. Like, it wasn't wait until I go into labor. They scheduled it in advance. And so I didn't have any vote in the decision of scheduling. They just notified me, hey, this is when we're going to do it. And they scheduled for 9/29/2021, which my birthday is 3/29. So that means we are exactly 6 months apart to the day.
Yeah.
Our birthdays. So and it'll always be that. And I said that only God can make that infinity loop of birthdays that forever will be every 6 months. One of us is going to be having a birthday.
Yeah.
Well, Susie, you just said that your birthday is March 29th, and I'm thinking, God needed us to talk today because there's
Yep.
two people in this
Two
room
people
who have
on
a
here.
birthday on March 29th.
No,
Yeah.
you are
Myself
not serious.
and Ian
Good
are
guess.
March 29th.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
about that?
I just love
So
that. Oh,
it's
Yeah.
fantastic.
See, we
Oh,
were meant to talk to us.
we were meant to talk to each other this
Yeah.
week.
Yeah.
Definitely.
We got a lot of March
I
29th
love
on
it. I
here.
love it.
Yeah. So tell me
That's
this: you turned 51 on March the 29th.
Did.
I'll catch up to you in April.
Oh,
And
okay.
and our friend Tony here is 62. Yeah.
Yeah.
He had his
Yeah.
birthday back in January.
So
yes.
what do you say? Because I'm sure there must be people who say crazy things to you. But what do you say when someone says, you two are going to be seniors when Lily is old enough to graduate high school? Like what are you doing? Is it a good thing that you're doing for her because you're going to be so old? And what's she going to do for parents and all this stuff?
What are you gonna do for parents? I love that.
Yeah, you're gonna go out and shop for some. Now listen, I say all this knowing that when I was born, my father was 55.
So
Okay.
you do.
So I lived some of this myself, except he'd had 6 before, he and mom. So, I don't know. I could have probably walked off the end of a wharf. I don't know if they'd noticed because they had a lot of kids running around. But for you two with your first child and the things that people say, I mean, if you had that weirdness, that sort of people in your business saying, well, what, you're so old. What are you doing? If you had, tell us about that.
Yeah. I mean, and I tell people before we even had kids that when you have a child, you're basically raising that child or live without you, because they can't be constantly dependent on you, because hopefully you'll precede them and they'll be here. But it's the same here. We're gonna raise her to live without us, and of course we're gonna raise her in God's way, of course. That's the only way we could go. It's all because of him that we're here. So.
And I know for me, nobody says anything like that. And I think that's because I'm a woman, because you'd have to say, hey, you're old.
Them.
Nobody wants to say that. Like I said, Tony, but they don't say it.
Yeah.
You go full Will Smith on him, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
You'd be
exactly. So nobody says, hey, you're mighty old to be trying to raise a baby. Nobody says that.
No.
But I have had somebody ask me the question you just asked. And I said to myself, first of all, if there are any negative comments, because they ask from a social media standpoint, people.
Yeah.
If there are any messages on social media, we wouldn't know because we don't look. So
Good
that's
for
the
you.
first thing.
Good
so
for
that
you.
makes life a whole lot simpler.
Yeah.
But the key for us, and it goes back to our faith, is like Lily was supposed to be here when she came here. And we were supposed to be her parents. And God knew exactly how old or young we were going to be when she was born. So whatever she needs from us, we're going to be there. If we let him, he will show us what we need to do and how we need to do it. And for as long or as short a period of time as we're going to be here on the planet with her. And so he has a plan. Like even the ages is a plan. It's all his plan, all his orchestration. So we're not worried about it.
Yeah.
We're not worried about it at all.
Well, and that's one of the great things that one of the reasons we wanted to talk to you both, because of this wonderful miracle and your reference to faith and how important it is. You mentioned, Abraham and Sarah story and how you kind of feel that connection with those two, with Lily coming along. Can you tell us a little bit more maybe about, how your walk with Jesus has been such an important part of all this? Because I know it's centered to everything, isn't it?
Oh, it has been. It has been. Because and the way we met was attributed to God as well. It's seldom known that I did at the time a local cable program called Testimony Live. And at the time we were doing a segment about Christians in abusive relationships. Domestic violence among Christians. And at church, I had a member at church who was in school at one of the local colleges. And I asked him if he knew a professor or somebody that could speak about it. And while we were in church, he called her. She agreed just like that. And we got together, we did the segment. And from there, we just kept going. And it just so happens, and this was God's doing, it just so happens I was trying to speak to her some more about programs. And so
Sure you were.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was about programs, Tony. I know the kind of programs you had in mind, Tony.
New word for it.
Yeah.
And so we had a meeting, and it just so happens at the meeting, it was like a lunchtime or something. And I asked her if she wanted to go grab something to eat.
Yeah.
So we went to this cafeteria.
Mhm.
It just so happened, I hadn't even thought about it.
And
It
you're
was
an
Valentine's Day.
Ooh.
We were in this cafeteria.
You smooth,
I
man.
didn't even know.
You
I'm
are
like,
smooth,
okay,
buddy.
Here we go. And it just took off from
Yeah.
there. It really did. It was
Wow.
amazing.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
That's
What
great.
about you, Susie, in terms of your faith and all that? Like,
It was one of those things where, in terms of, I say it over and over again, you've got to let God do the work in you in whatever season you're in. So you have to eventually let him do the work in you as an unmarried before you can have a platform for being a successful married, right? So, it was one of those things where by the time he and I met, I was in my 30s. I was not, quote unquote, looking for a husband. I was not, as a matter of fact, I had just come from a history of being mighty codependent. I had finally come to this place in my life, and I don't know how God did it except by his miraculous nature, where I was actually cool with the idea of being an unmarried, like permanently. Because I was thinking to myself, wow, this is a kind of freeing life to live. Like you can go where you want to go, do what you want to do. If you want cookies and cream ice cream at 11 at night, you can just get in the car and run over there. You don't have a husband who says to you, babe, that's not safe. Because that's what he said to me after we got married. He's like, babe, that's not safe. We're not going to get ice cream at 11:30 at night. So, and it was shortly after that I met him doing that program about domestic violence. And I was like, what a nice man. And so we were, like I said, just like he said, we talked about more programming stuff later on, and ended up having lunch that day, and then something sparked.
Yeah.
It really, really did spark. Yeah. And then, like I said, by March of that was February of 2007, and then by March of 2008, we were married. Married.
Now, you had said to me when we talked ahead of this in preparation about the Abraham and Sarah thing, that it's a little bit different than Abraham.
Yeah, we're in
and Sarah.
reverse. Yeah,
you're in reverse, right?
That's right.
Yeah, in the Bible, of course, Sarah was the barren one, and Abraham was the one who was way too old. With us, it's reverse. I'm the one who's way too old, and Tony's the one who has the medical issues that make it difficult. And it was like, and God was talking to us about, that story, and he said to me, I'm gonna redeem that story for you. Because in that story, our storyline will be more like Ishmael, because it's a whole different age,
right.
And so for us, the child of the promise is the child of the donor age,
right,
versus the Abraham, Sarah, and Isaac story. And it was like, but he told me, he said, I'm going to redeem. He said that to me right before we made the egg donor decision. He said, no worries. He said, I'm going to redeem that story for you.
I got it.
And I said, okay, whatever you want to do. That's what this is your rodeo. We are riding in it. We're gonna go whatever road you want to go down. But that is what we hear all the time. Abraham and Sarah, Abraham and Sarah, Abraham and Sarah. And this is our child of the promise.
So you've said a lot about the reassurances that you've had throughout, and how you didn't panic, and which I think is a big thing physically, even, right? Because stress can have such a deleterious effect on, right? So, absolutely. But you've been reassured by your faith and all that. I just wonder, perhaps as one of our closing questions here, what was the biggest surprise out of this whole experience? And because there were the things that you had confidence in, and I guess on top of that, what's the greatest learning or takeaway for yourselves? And if you think about those who may be on that journey to fertility or parenthood, who are frustrated today, or feeling, because people may listen to this and think, geez, I've prayed too. Like I've said my prayers and I've heard God, but I'm still not getting pregnant. And like, what's your counsel?
I think, you want to go first?
No, you go first.
I think for me, the biggest thing is you have got to be okay in this current season that you are in. You have, and if you're not, like if you're not at peace in the season that you're in, that's where the focus needs to be. Because it's the heart of God for us to be at peace in him in whatever season we're in. So if we're in a season right now where we do not have any children, and we're not at peace, she's just having a little conversation, and we're not at all at peace, then he wants to talk about that.
Right.
Because, and then once we're at peace in the season we're in, then he can move us to the next season. And the reason why that's so critical is whatever stuff that's keeping us from being at peace in this season is going to show up in the next season magnified. So it's going to show up in the parenting. It's going to show up. We won't mean it to, but it's going to show up in the parenting. It's going to show up in the marriage. It's going to show up, and it's going to cause problems. So God's like, look, ask yourself, okay, what do you want? Lord, what do you want me doing in this season while I'm waiting? You know, and then do that. You know, I think that's what it was. People are like, it didn't stress you out when COVID made you wait a year or something. And we're like, honestly, no. And we, oddly enough, like I said, it's not because we were some superhero Christians or anything. It was because we had been down that road with him so many times in life of not learning or embracing whatever season we were in. So he had done in us that work that says, you enjoy where you are. So then since we had enjoyed being just us, by the time the COVID delay happened, we were cool with being just us. It was okay, you know? And so it was be cool in the season you're in. And the other thing is expect the unexpected. Like, honestly, it's like he did this not at all in the way that we thought he was going to do it. Like, not at all. And then topped it off with all this notoriety that we were like,
never expected.
Wait,
that's had to have been a big surprise, eh?
Oh, huge. We always knew it would be like a family story. You know, the great miracle story of, you know, we're going to tell Lily and Liz going to tell her children, and we tell the brothers and the sisters and the aunts and the uncles. But we had no idea that it would be an international story.
Right.
Like that was not even, we were like, wait, what? As a matter of fact, the OBGYN, on the day of the cesarean, we were waiting to roll back, and she goes, hey, you know what? You guys should tell your story. Yep, for that. And we're like, yeah, sure. So it was supposed to be just this little hospital online newslettery thing. Like, it was supposed to be something small, you know? Okay, we can tell Lily she was in the newsletter.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And then
the wonderful thing about this story too is that it's just not confined to you, because when you've told this story, as Kevin said, there might be somebody listening today that you'll never meet, that's hearing this and hearing what you're saying, and God is speaking to them and counseling them and walking with them. And so this goes far beyond just you. Yeah.
He always keeps his promises, and he keeps them in ways you don't expect, and he grows you. That's the thing. It's like, it's not about exclusively the promise. There's a growing that he does with us to meet the promise where he's fulfilling it, and is allowing him to do that as well.
Well, I got another question just popped in mind. Has God promised to either one of you that Lily gets a brother, or what?
Everybody asks us, are you going to have another one?
Yeah, everybody wants to go.
And what I always say is, you know what? It's totally possible.
Totally.
You just never know with God.
You know,
it's totally possible.
But I can tell that you're loving the season you're in with her right now. And like you say, that's so important, most important thing. So that's great.
It's been amazing.
How's your sleep, Tony?
Sleep, gotta say, it's not too bad. It's bad, but not too bad, because I'm telling you, Susie when I have to work, she'll take over and let me get some sleep. Right. And I have seen her, it's like she has so many sleepless nights, and I'm like, oh, I feel so bad. I feel so bad. I'm going to work and she has no sleep. I'm like, she's got the baby the rest of the day. I'm like, oh man.
But you're managing that okay, Susie?
Oddly enough, yes. Because and I still think it's a Holy Spirit thing. It's like he gives you what you need for whatever he has you doing. And if it's being up with a newborn at 3 in the morning, then that's what you'll do. And I think the other thing, and it might be because we're older, it might be because we're older in Jesus, I don't know. But I think about you'll never pass this way again.
Yeah.
No.
So I am not in a big old rush. Oh, I'm waiting for her to grow up. I'm waiting for her to do this. And I'm like, no, I am savoring every 3 in the morning. I'm savoring as best I can, because I know that when she goes off to kindergarten or goes off to college, I'm gonna be like, oh, I remember when she was little.
I know it goes so fast, and you do savor.
Savoring. I am
savor it all.
I'm like,
Rob,
I savor everything.
I got to think. Rob's got a couple of guys that are in their 20s now, and I bet you it feels like you blinked and they became.
Well, I was just going to say, when I hear you saying savoring those moments, my oldest, who's 24, almost 25, is actually moving out tomorrow to another city. Wow. He's moving away. So as you're saying that, and my wife and I are getting ready to say goodbye tomorrow. He's not too far; he's only a couple hours away. But that's just you blink, and then they're off in another city with a job and an apartment. It's like, oh my gosh, what happened?
When did this happen?
Like, where did that go?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
So God bless you for recognizing those moments and really living in them, because they're so
Got
sacred
to.
and they go so fast. Yeah.
And I'll tell you, the other fellow that had a birthday on March the 29th, Ian up there.
Mhm.
When I first met him, he was 10, and now he's 21.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
he's
Go
21.
Ian.
It's true, yeah.
Really?
So,
Wow.
yeah, he was a kid.
And now
Their
you're
mom and dad
blinked and Ian's how old? You know?
21 now. So his mom
Yeah.
and dad bring him to church. He's this little 10-year-old guy, 11 maybe, might have been a year after I got here. So 9 or 10 years ago. And there's little Ian. And now all of a sudden there's Ian running the whole show now. So
Ian, you're
awesome.
official tech genius.
Thank you.
Well, hey, Susie and Tony Troxler has been our guests today, and of course Lily has been our guest, the youngest
Yay,
member of the
Lily.
Vicars Crossing. Hey guys, we are so blessed to have you with us. Thank you for sharing your story and sharing your journey. And we know, as I say, people are listening to this, and I know you've given some hope to folks. And
Thanks for having us.
Grace,
We so
grace to
loved
them
it.
too. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, thanks again to Susie and Tony and Lily for dropping by.
I'll go home and
And,
talk to Catherine and Rob. I mean, I'm 51.
I think you've
she's
got a conversation to be had here.
she's
Yeah.
53. I mean, what could go wrong?
That's right. It's all downhill.
We all know that Kevin's life will
Yep.
change dramatically if there's a child involved.
Yeah. You just never know. You
never
just
know.
Wow.
You never know.
All right. Well, thanks again to our sponsors today on the Vicars Crossing, to A. Miller George Funeral Home, where each life is celebrated, and their sister company, Cremation London, Middlesex, both family owned and operated. Our thanks to Hyde Park Care Pharmacy. Make sure you say hi to Carol when you're there. Locally owned and locally operated and locally loved. And to Molly Maid and Tricia and everybody at Molly Maid. Make your home a healthy haven. Call Molly Maid London today. I'm Rob Henderson from Holy Trinity, St. Stephen's.
And I'm Kevin George from St. Aidan's Anglican Church.
And my name is Ian. Thank you for listening.
All right. And remember, Kevin, to always look both ways.
Before you cross the street, there could be somebody coming in their 50s with a stroller.
Thank you for listening. Our hosts are Kevin George and Rob Henderson. Our producer and composer is myself, Ian, with original artwork done by Elizabeth Dodman. If you have any questions or want to know where to find us, tweet us at Vicars Crossing or find us on Facebook at The Vicars Crossing. If you have any other questions about anything heard on this podcast, leave us a comment or look in the description to find out more. Thanks!